Alright, Section 3120 Foreign Currency Policy Payments. Foreign currency payment with the process of the foreign payments through the international tradings, international TS Gov requesting the federal entity the exit for the application for the entry for the annual file-based payments. Federal entities enter over the payments of the international, I believe it's Treasury system. Must government certify the payments of some other level of the statement payment of policies statements. For additional information regarding enrolling in the International Treasury Statement System, Gov, federal entity unable to do except for the International Treasury Service, Gov can request the foreign payment of the process on behalf of officials who request the foreign currency, the U.S. dollar wires. Foreign currency checks by submitting this SPS for the S1166 before submitting the disbursement form blank. Federal entity must have the activity FS form 210 with the designation certification officer of the SPS S1166 available to the SPS. Federal entity should contact the officials for the International Treasury Service of the Gov. Service of the staff of the current detail of the instruction process of the manual SF for the 1166 request the foreign payment of federal entities can read the probe with the calling 816-414-2100 federal officials of the staff will confer whether the current required support or provide the instruction form for the need to submit the request. Alright, scheduling 12010 with the scheduling standard form 1166, the foreign currency payments for the standard form 1166 may contain either wire payment, the electronic funding transfer, check payment, the times to give it a separate standard form 1166 required each of the type of the payment completing standard form 1166 clearly indicates the payment amount, whether the payment is to be made with the wire payment, the electronic fund transfer payment, or check payment. With more one payment, the same payment of the types of the being issued for the same foreign common currency for the list, many of the pay, if possible, the standard form 1166 the pay, multiple payments required for the being issued for the different currency to create with the different standard form 1166 the each of the currency inquired or required. Initiate the foreign currency payments for the International Treasury Services of the government as standard form 1166 supply official service with the information listed in subsection 312010A wire electronic fund transfer public payments of subsection 312010. 12010B, check payments, the provisional service to reject the return standard form 1166 that does not include the information listed in subsection 31201010A for the International Treasury Service for the Gov, the wire, effective electronic funding transfer payment, standard form 1160 for the International Treasury Service, Gov, the wire, the electronic electronic federal transfer payments must include the following information: paid, the name, the paid address, bank account, the international bank account number, SWIFT bank account identification code for the other in the bank identifier for the information when country currency appropriate, and bank name of the bank address of the bank payment currency amount, the invoice information details, reason for the payment required, some of the currencies. 312010B, check payment is SF 1166. Check payments may include the information paid, name of the page of the pay, and currency amount with the invoice information detail, the reason for the detail payment required within some experience is 312010C with the expressing payment amount of the federal entity must ensure for the amount of the SF 1166 the same amount of the bill for the invoice the void for the disbursement error with the amount that include the decimal for the following due date for the all currency of the accepting currency expressed as only a whole number, for example, the JM of the Korean War, Central African franc with the Indo-Polynesian rupiah, currency for the three for the numbers for the half of the decimal place, for example, the Tunisian dinero, Jordanian dinar, essentially include the three numbers of the decimal place on the standard form 1166 request. 3120 payment of requiring foreign currency. The federal entity of the contractor have been billed and invoiced for the foreign currency for the officials for the process of the payment of the federal entity behalf of officials for the support foreign payment of processing where any of the following conditions apply. Only the foreign currency amount was done with the listed invoice. US dollar amount provided with the invoice specific payment of foreign currency, the amount payable for the US dollar form recipients. 312030 payment requiring U.S. dollar form receipts. Official service process with the U.S. dollar payment of electronic form received the recipients through the International Treasury Service of the Gov. The Gov not via the checks when the invoice bill requires the U.S. dollar entry for the request include the information needed of the foreign bank. Be aware that some countries strict local currency regulation, foreign exchange control prohibit exporters for the receiving, accepting payment of the local currency purchase for the items to be exported. Before scheduling payment, the federal entity should ask offender if they may be paid in their local currency. 312040 submitting stamp form 1166. Federal entity shall contact officials of the request of stamp form 1166. Review the payment occurrence requirement before submitting of the request information. Contact officials of the International Treasury Service, the government staff of the calling 816-414-2100. Officials of the International Treasury Services. Government will provide the mailing address for the request that the federal entities can submit with the stamp form 1166. The process can be that overnight with the mail service allowed with the federal entity to track with a single payment and request document. Original SPSF 1166 signed with the certifying officer. There must be mail officials with does not accept the copy of the duplicates. Alright, 312050 with the projecting stamp form 1166 financials with the project stamp form 1166 the signature 1166 that does not match signature of the act of the certified office. Certified officer. Schedule instruction provides subsection 3125 10 are not filed. Section 3125 designated depository. Officials of the responsible designated domestic and international depository. U.S. government officials for the banks for the selection of requesting federal entity with the recommendations. Submission of the supporting documents each of the bank compliant with the Office of the Foreign Asset for the control of the anti-money laundering regulation. Officials over the preserve of the rights for the project of the sign. This is a positive designation which believe that in the past over the interest of the Treasury to do so for any reason. All federal entities require the local currency for the operating account. Rare ends for the U.S. dollar account must formally ask the officials to approve the designated official instruction institution for the account. The conservative official institution must complete with the applicable the OFAC with the requirements of the AML or the Office of Foreign Asset control the anti-money laundering regulations at Treasury discretion of the type that legal defined against bank, which we consider the part of the review, the profit, the bank we call the denial of the bank designation, and the proof of the request to include the minimum justifying account with the location, name of the currency criteria, the use of the federal entity determined with the best bank with reason for the recommendation, selection number of the name of the bank designated, regardless of the possible review of the designation, bank address, name of the title of the bank office, the telephone number, the percentage ownership of the U.S. bank, with the name of the corresponding bank, and if the United States, the account number, the point of contact name, title, telephone number, statement indicating the bank is complete compliant with the provision section of the reason why it is not compliant. Request for the U.S. dollar accounts for the must be included with the supporting documents indicating the commitment for the pledge for the collateral with request for the bank with the recommendation of the selection. If the banks agree with the pledge of the collateral with the Federal Reserve Bank of the federal entity may request the U.S. dollar operating account with the bank refuse for the federal entity must only request the U.S. dollar zero balance account. Treasury policy in selecting official and financial of the institution maintain U.S. government operating accounts predicated on the most beneficial banking arrangement available to the U.S. government to transact in essential business. This includes consideration of both economic and non-economic factors. However, Treasury gives preference for the U.S. financial institution of the local bank that range with the more beneficial for the U.S. government. When establishing new foreign currency of the operating account, seeking to change the existing account, the accounting officer shall be obtained with the relevant information included, but is not limited to pricing information U.S. owned with the leading local financial institution. Here to determine which officer for the offer with the most beneficial agreement arrangement. Financial institution may seek with the change of the existing operating account anytime the federal entity may seek with the change of the existing account to any of the financial institute that offers equal to more beneficial banking arrangement that currently receive the reflect the higher level of the U.S. ownership of the present depository. After at least 3 years for each of the accountable officer for the show determine if the most cost-effective to obtain the information U.S. owned leading local financial institution able to obtain with the beneficial agreement with the prospect of obtaining information from the bank's most equitable. All banks submitting information identical questionnaires on the request information. Determine the most beneficial banking arrangement. The federal entity should follow the 3 areas serve with the descending of the order important standard operation service to the minimal required of the customer local banking profit the other special for the team necessary with a particular country the circumstance required service the minimum of the capability of the counter payments of the page for the outlying areas processing electronic funding transfer the checks only if the electronic funding transfer is not available to deposit the submission of the daily monthly bank statement is needed capable to receive the swift message of the acceptance of the accountable office funding procedure. The addition of the federal entity should consider customary bank payments for the interest of the operating account with the overdraft charge the waiver of the miscellaneous charge particular with a particular country supposed to service the banks will and provide with additional minimum required customary local bank services if more than one banker offers the equivalent services. Operating account banks with forfeiture potential for the interest earning of the account but are not to be used as subsidized banking service that would otherwise fund with the operation profits. For example, the cashier receives subsection 3145.20. Alright, and all record for the paramount important for the federal entity with the express of the due diligence recommendation bank for the designation of the positive authority with the federal entity must ensure the bank is available with the financial security depending on the reliable financial institution complying with the relevant U.S. laws, regulation, avoid losses, the interest of the U.S. government funds, the protective of the federal entity should confer with the local U.S. entity to consolidate its system for determining which banks must meet the criteria for the categorization, maintaining operating account, federal entity for the earns of the significant value of the designated bank. For example, the bank will close with the taking offer and another bank of the host government adverse treatment of the bank regulatory federal entity of the federal entity of the must ensure the treasury value be for the dispersing debit management call center the 816-414-2100 section 130 foreign exchange transaction official purposes. Foreign exchange transaction accountable off of duly authorized agency for the power of the official purpose subject for the Treasury Finance Manual, Volume 1, Part 2, Chapter 3200 of the conduct of the following check for the exchange transaction purchase of foreign currency for the U.S. dollar for the required for the dispersing purpose of the dispersing payment, foreign currency for the U.S. government credit for the exchange foreign currency, check for the draft bills for the exchange for the other instruments paid with the foreign currency for representation official, form the accountable officer for the accountable the U.S. currency for the U.S. dollar, draft for the bills exchange the other instrument paid the U.S. dollar, using authorized treasury and the accounting officer for the domain purchase for the foreign currency together with a balance on the hand for the time of the purchase without exceeding the limit set forth in subsection 314520. 3135 check cashing the other instrument of the foreign country for the accommodation purpose. The purchase of the accommodating track for the transactions are authorized when offered or charged with the purpose of determination that satisfactory local bank for the facility not available to conduct the accommodation for the transaction accountable officer for the authorized the agent for the power of the subject of the restrictions contained with these procedures for visual funds available the following to pay out the foreign currency check for the draft bills exchange with the other investments paid with the U.S. dollars to cash of the same currency with the drawn with the foreign currency check with the accountable the officer for the United States official for checking the account with the accommodation of the file with the member of the armed forces of the United States, civilian employee of the U.S. government, or U.S. citizens contracted with the personally enlarged, engaged U.S. government project foreign countries. So any such contractors must be U.S. firm citizens, and any of the personnel must be the U.S. citizen, personal authorized aid, government federal entities operating with any of the U.S. United States for the citizens. Develop individual listed 1 through 4 holding valid power attorney. Dependent civil employee with the U.S. government, member of the armed forces of the United States, employee with the U.S. contract, the council contract, the under the contract, the government federal entities under the property identification, safe haven, both for the under order for the competent authority to prevent with emergency evacuations of the accommodation, exchange of the transaction, all the dependent of any of the civilian employee, U.S. contractor, or subcontractor members of the armed force, maybe the amount of the Department of State standardized regulation, general joint federal trade, travel regulation, U.S. armed forces. Foreign nationals employed with the civil employment under the contract for the U.S. government, contract for the subcontract for the U.S. firms engaged U.S. government project for the foreign country for the provide check for the representative of the third country nationals, U.S. Treasury dollar checks for the U.S. dollar checks the issue for the contrary for the third country nationals presenting the checks to be cashed, U.S. organizations bound for the U.S. government such as the Canadians do not violate local country government currency law to promote the interest of the government abroad and do not adversely impact and pair with the operation entity for the review of the Department of State. For the example, the 8 would be the review of the provided compensation exchange with the U.S. school with the specific the purchasing both of the other possible other supply with not available to the country. 1917 of the United States gas foreign currency for the check for the drawing with the U.S. Treasury so for the check for the president of the person whose orders for the drawing with the proper identification currency for the U.S. dollar local economy with the accountable the officer for the authorized agent of any trash cash for the dollar check for the draft of the bill exchange for the other instruments for the U.S. employee with the U.S. dollar only so for the amount of the required for the mag such purchase of the U.S. government authorized fiscal for the sub the commissionary snags and snag powers and threats for the exception for the purpose of the travel house of the assigned post. 135 to 20 for the purchase of the foreign currency for the firm of the individuals, accounting for the authorization for the purchase of the foreign currency for the instrument of the payable for the foreign currency for the individual filing condition and limitation, notwithstanding the transfer of financial meaning volume 1, part 2, 3200, accountable for the authorization for the empower of the purchase of the foreign countries. Foreign currency for the U.S. government employee for the before departure for the termination for the before foreign assignment that he employed for the receive the home leave for the return or for the as authorized to sell the convert those items that need the replacement at his or her return for the provide with the control that have been established to prevent conversion for more than accountable offer of the authorized agent. If the amount of foreign currency presented does not exceed the sum of the employee with the salary of the annual allowance for the 2 bi-weekly pay period that must be purchased without requiring documentation, any fine of the departing employee with any of the foreign currency presented for the exceed the amount of the authorized the purchase of the state above the employee with the presenting such for the currency policy should be required to submit the written application containing the statement of describing the source of the currency, affirming the denial of the currency of the presenting the required of the violation of local, federal, and even the administrative regulation, exchange control of the law of the control laws of the country concerning local officer for the charge of the federal entity with which the employee is attached should approve the application. The above provisions, subject to further limitations, subject 314520, with the accountable of the authorized agent for the empowered with research from foreign currency that is to perform reverse the accommodation exchange with any of the person with the authorized the purchase foreign currency through the accommodation exchange with the provided person leaving the country for the amount of the subject to the limitations, subsection 314520. Alright, 313530, with the precaution to avoid loss, the accountable officer for the authorization must extremely cautious to avoid loss of the U.S. government if the person presented with the check for the cash is not personally known of the accountable officer for the authorization. The person must identify with the credentials, example, the passport check, other instrument withdrawn from the U.S. bank with the B cash, but it should be made payable to both, for example, the U.S. Embassy Paris, France, the U.S. Consulate, with the generate the monetary in Mexico. 313540, recorded deposition, accounting officer for the authorized agent, and should enter all instruments of record showing the following: the essential descriptive information, except for the date, number of the instrument, name of the drawer, name of the location of the drawee, amount of the name of the pay, with the addition of the recorder should show the date of the transaction, personal address of the presenting with the instrument, with cash, with the name of the address of the person's employer, additional appropriate reference for the additional identification presented with the example of the passport, with the driver's license, etc. All U.S. dollar instrument prepared with the United States should be deposited properly with the credit of the U.S. Treasury General Account. 3140, acquisition foreign exchange. Federal entities provide incur the international treasury security .gov, the issue foreign currency payments electronically issued for the international U.S. dollar wire transfer and performance for the ITS.gov with the subsection 311510E with the contact distribution and debt management fiscal services. 3140 with the exchange with the U.S. dollar and foreign currency. Federal entity with those specifically responsible for dealing in the value with the dollar and foreign exchange for the Treasury for the Federal Reserve, the voyage for the holding the foreign currency balance for the extra of the immediate working, the requirements of exchange with the U.S. dollar, the foreign currency. The federal entity must preserve the following guidelines as they apply with the exchange. Most conduct all exchange with the foreign currency. The spot delivery can normally purchase with the foreign currency the delivery in 2 business days. They may not use the forward contract. The purchase with the negotiated rates directly for the foreign government to provide the contract. For example, the individual foreign exchange houses, unless authorized by Treasury, should exchange with the U.S. dollar foreign country at the time of the foreign currency need the immediate funding of the requirements accountable to the officer shall ensure the payment is made of the foreign currency purchase of the value of the day most void and any of the appearance of the currency speculation with the exchange market area responsible in any exchange program across resulting in the foreign currency the denomination of the international financial agreement. U.S. government and federal entities should attempt to reduce the exchange rates at the risk of the United States for the international program to take the step within a large portion of the program to expand for the United States financial arrangement of the U.S. dollar and dollar equivalents. 314020, operating account balance limitation, accounting officer exchange for the amount of the foreign exchange pursues the U.S. dollar together with the balance with the hand with the concentrate with the immediate disbursement requirement not exceed 5 to 7 business day supply in order minimize local currency operating bank balances, minimize the loss for the due with the date rate with the evaluation appropriated, avoid premature drawdown with the Treasury General Account. This result will ensure that save the U.S. government has favorably impact the U.S. balance of payments. Federal and it should keep the balance for the local currency operating accounts of the bank and book for the code for the zero balance of the possible to incur the overcast of the account. Accountable officer should adopt the funding technique for the procedure to reduce the average account balance for the point with additional administrative cost for loss volume discount. Possible overdraft charge with generated further balance reduction should be accepted within projection of the interesting. The federal entity should review the 5-7 business day with the need of the operating cap for the quarterly basis. Certain situation administrative costs, local banking regulation possible with the volume discounts if they made override any interest, save the balance of the time payment, the conservation payment requirement to perceive the different reckoning with the above the situation, accountable officer should record purchase of the foreign exchange with an amount together with him the projected actual balance for the on hand of the value date that would not exceed the estimated drawdowns against the operating account the ensuing 5 to 7 business days. Drawn the Department of Federal and the may not exceed 5 to 7 business days supply fund the accounting without with a special waiver the requirement of the Treasury Federal entity should conduct the independent annual reviews of the balance of the insured 5 to 7 May balance maintained. The result of the review must be shared with the Treasury upon request. Alright, 314030 for the acquisition for exchange of the Treasury purchase for all of the foreign currency for the provide with the funds for the Treasury appropriated for the local depository accounting so for the international Treasury service for the government calling off the authorized or agent for the empower of the purchase of the foreign exchange with the accommodated exchange for individual only man of the under circumstance subscribed to the chapter of the Treasury from sort of the authorized for the government country concealed with the accounting officer for the authorized agent shall retain the documentation particular with the foreign exchange purchase of the source include the rate with which the exchange was performed. 3140, the rate of the exchange purchase for the Italian government source for the needs by so that after to the acquire the foreign exchange purchase for the source for the U.S. government with the best rate available according to the laws of the country in which exchange expended the fixed legal rates. 314048 fixed legal rate, the best legal rate with the U.S. government depending on the circumstances each of the country made officially with the established by rating with the dollars, including the diplomatic rate, the special rate of the established agreement with the authority of the country with the fixed to prevail with the federal entity with the to purchase foreign exchange the best applicable rates of the particular transaction may affect the purchase of fixed legal rate for the formality of obtaining bids, but purchase of the evidence statement of the signature so fitting for the pertinent data relevant to the purchase of the data include the date amount of the purchase exchange rate of the accountable of the authorized agent shall obtain the statement of the supporting document monthly accountable statements. 314040B, the non-fixed legal rates where rates legally applicable to a particular section of the transaction not fixed such for the rates fixed for the other rates that are legal to particular transaction federal entities for the purchase of the federal exchange best obtainable rates whether foreign exchange purchase of the non-fixed rates for the federal entities should listed bids not less than 3/4 available cutting off the authorized agent except the bid quoting with the beneficial legal for the exchange rate with the more favorable legal fixed rate cutting off the authorized agent shall retain the documentation stating the most beneficial bid for the accepted and certified the most accounting statement. Alright, 3145, the rate exchange for the expense for the accommodation exchange of the federal agency for the compute the exchange for the transaction accommodation purpose the other official for the expense for the to avoid the loss for the due fluctuation exchange rate as much possible, or unless otherwise authorized Treasury federal entity show the prevailing rate of the transfer foreign currency for the expense for the U.S. dollars accounting purpose for the 3150 current electing interest for the deposits. Collection foreign vendors for the proceed the process of the international trading, international treasury service will transfer the fund via the firewall credit card, credit gateway with the credit gateway the post with the federal wires, federally and the account send the standard form 215 the department deposit venture for the collection of information repository federal entity for the deposit reporting federal entity with the contact official for the international treasury services of the government staff calling 816-414-2100 receive the bill for the collection account with the instruction of the base from the currency of the collection to 3150 20 funding authorized base borrowing with the accounting officer restricted with the foreign currency from the specified federal entity of the program and account for the purpose meaning current use government obligation replacing foreign currency one with the need of the purpose of the foreign currency was originally set aside. Public Law 89, 67, Title 315303 with unfunding profit to provide federal entity to receive the foreign currency for the time of the meeting of the need of the federal entity expenditure for the account with the office of the authorized agent must unfund all the affected program and account for the purchasing for the foreign commercial currency commercially unfunded all effective account for the accounting officer must recently reclassified with the central accounting reporting system classification transaction accountability CTA module 3 of this process accounting officers credibly entitled for the program X 7,000 accounts unfunding an account for the treasury of the 20X 7,900 advance unfound foreign currencies use the funds for the U.S. government expenditures and currency of expenditure reimburse the program and account with the foreign currency required for the particular program intended. It is necessary to reimburse the borrowed foreign currency for the accountable officer repurchase for the foreign currency commercial for the U.S. dollars. It's important to note that these current foreign currencies credit specifically the federal entity program and account for the legal initially inquired without expenditure for the U.S. dollar, but there may be the host government as a contribution alone with the repayment of the payments without funding with the twofold that makes for the foreign currency not currently needed for the federal entity of the program and account for the delays for the expenditure of the U.S. dollar for the purchase of foreign currency. Additional information guidelines regarding unfunding contain the Treasury Financial Manual, Volume 1, Part 2, Chapter 3200, 3150-30 with the disposition of excess balance federal entity tribe with the transfer of the foreign currency to make more of the immediate disbursement requirements over the accountable officer for the military and state for a particular locality. Federal entities may and contact with the U.S. Embassy for the country concerned with the foreign currency for the acquisition accountable the officer for the have temporarily access the balance should the initiative of the action affect the transfer of the accountable officer for the using like currency for the federal entity should use the international treasury system collection module indicated the Treasury accounting system symbol with the business entity type code when depositing funds with the Treasury General Fund accounting Treasury General account may use the Common Access Reporting System CTA. Classification transaction accountability model for the reclassify the funds deposited with the Treasury General Fund and through the International Treasury System Gov Federal entity the need of the contact officials serve the International Treasury System Gov staff by collecting 816-414-2100 receive the specific collection accounting serve for the based on the currency being set and into the collection 30-150-40 of the interest of the deposit whenever the deposit of the accounting officer shall obtain the interest of the local currency checking account. However, the accounting officer shall not maintain the except the balance to receive the interest of the accountable officer must follow the procedure below. If the collection of foreign currency cover the depository account, for example, the local currency checking account that exceeds 7 business days supply with the attempt to select the currency the accountable officer shall be exhausted. The accountable officer must sell the foreign currency the U.S. dollar that must deposit the funds of the Treasury General account using the International Treasury System International Treasury Security Government Accounting Office for the more monitoring interesting bearing account to ensure the interest being created with the timely basis the per agreement between accountable officer for the banks, accounting officer for the credit for the U.S. dollar equivalent all interest earned with the U.S. government fund with the Treasury miscellaneous receipt account 3220. Section 3155 of the disbursement rules governing domestic disbursement overlap with the foreign exchange. The disbursement include the prompt payment of the provision of the central accounting reporting system reporting. Alright, 3160 gain and deficiencies account with the gain of the deficiency federal and the must compute with the gain of the deficiency monthly with applying with the gain of the offset the deficiency determining amount with the net gain of the net deficiency federal and the maintain with the account 2067 and 63 the gain of the deficiency the exchange the transaction with the records of the deficiency accounting office determining the amount of the net gain of the net deficiency with each of the accounting month. Federal entities must report the gains for the deficiency recorded the transaction reclassification of the CARS CTA model clearance and tolerance clearance classification transaction accountable model 3160-20 with a bad check transaction. Bad check is provided with the federal entity result of the return of the instrument of the payer of the federal entity but must report for the amount instrumental properly for the deficiency of the disbursing of the economic officer for the authorization should immediately recover the equivalent amount of the U.S. government funds paid out on the instrument. Accountable officer successfully he should arrange the permit with the amount of the recovery for the disbursing officer of the deficiency previously reported and all efforts to recover the funds have been exhausted and are not successful. Federal entities made sure of the deficiency of the account with the 2067 and 63. Sure of the deficiency account must be recorded and reclassified as the CARS classification transaction application model account model R316030 mutilated foreign currency accounting officer for the authorization shall take every possible precaution to prevent acceptance of the mutilated foreign currency the collection payment the exchange of the transaction accountable to the officer of the authorization and holding mutilated foreign currency he shall make every effort to replace it through the local bank the host country's central bank 316040 the counterfeit currency accountable to the officer of the authorization shall take every possible precaution to prevent acceptable counterfeit currency of the U.S. collection of the collection counterfeit the transfer financial manual volume part 5, Chapter 2000, Section 2035, Section 3165 of the authority to disburse and impress funds. Preliminary matter of the federal entity the contemplate establishing the impress fund of the federal entity should first discover the option of the first service for the determining if the ultimate approach that might not be suitable given the numbers of different payments of the option fiscal service that may be available. The federal entities have the no charge of the federal entity may pursue the plan that established for the impress only fund only with the federal entity can destroy them and have the legal authority holds on the funds outside of the treasury make anticipated payments using cash. Federal entity the must with the legal authority hold up the outside of the treasury to become the impress of the fund fixed credit for cash petty for the cash fund with the foreign currency for the over the coin have the advance for the cashier funds held outside of the treasury impress fund with the exemption of the general rule of the federal and entity with the receive the public money any of the sort of the statutory require with the deposit of these funds with the U.S. Treasury see Section 31 U.S. Stamp Code 3302. The exemption arrived only in the 3 and circumstance the first of rare case federal entity may have the statutory authority to hold the money without depositing it in the U.S. Treasury. Second, a federal entity may have implied with the authority to hold the funds outside of the Treasury, and so if the statutory authority disbursing authority that is federal entity would be permitted to make electronic payments through the Federal Reserve Banking issue the Treasury check itself. Third, federal entity may obtain the delegation of the disbursement authority of the Treasury's CDO of the region with the company with the efficient CDO determined such delegation would appropriate with the case of the delegated of the disbursement authority of the extent of the authority to hold the outside of the Treasury set forth the delegation document. In addition, the authority to hold the funds outside of the Treasury Federal and make they have legal authority to make the anticipated payment of cash and during all federal payments with required the made of the electronic electronic funding transfer. There are only certain circumstances in which the payment and other means the legally authorized category of the payment is encompassed with those circumstances set forth in Title 31 CFR 2084. Only anticipated payments fall into only one of the listed categories federal and legal authorized to make the using cash. Also, the federal any deposit fund financial institution must be designated by the Treasurer to financial agent of the U.S. Treasury for the collateral with required balance of the grade of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation insurance. Alright, note the federal entities have the grant of the authority to disburse the impressed funds must clarify the impressed fund transaction notice established for appropriate the Treasury accounting symbol of the business, the event type code, the stamps provided with officials with the ref and the tab of the Treasury accounting symbol of the business, event type code, is default of the Treasury accounting system of the Treasury accounting symbol of the business, the event type code, the use of the fund, the impressed of the account of the federal entity must reclassify each for the payment at every time of the obligation, use of the Treasury accounting system of the business, the entity type business event type code of the accounting central accounting reporting system of the collection trans accountable the accounting applicability module. SAM default action account must be clear with the $0 balance with the third business of the day closed with the accounting month of the federal entity does not clear the SAM default of the accounting timely or receive the contact official service cash accounting decision regarding the incomplete reporting immediate resolution official service will measure after the federal entity to clear the SAM default account by third business day of the month based on the federal entity performance. R3170 checks in for the other communication related with the Treasury disbursement payments. 317010 with the communications for the Office of Official Services of the requirements section of the federal and officials for the disbursing for the any of the official services of the mail various type of the communication recipient for the Treasury disbursement payment. The types of communication include the pens of the document common to know of the insert include the envelope sheet of the transmit Treasury disbursement check payment of pays measure printed with the outside of the envelope for the bench of the trailer Treasury disbursement check payment is paid with the commonly known with the back of the envelope matched with the letter for the recipient Treasury the disbursement for the electronic check payment is other similar document delivered to the recipient Treasury disbursement payments. For purpose of the section, insert the back of the envelope matched with the letters for the other similar documentation delivered to officials for the recipient Treasury disbursed payments for the collective refers to the communication as the service of the provided officials for the delivery of the communication as referred to the communication services become the delivery communication fiscal service payment recipient careers optional policy and legal consideration fiscal service the chief of the distribution officer renewing final approval of the authority of the final entity requires over the communication service to see contacts. 317020 and informal discussions about the communications for the officer of the official service before formal request for the communications for the federal entity of the will inform the discover the actual service for the timing, specification, the purpose of the concept of the proposal of the communication, whether the federal entity is asking officials for the permit of the communication federal entity on behalf of officials service will ask will work of the federal entity to ensure that timely delivery of the proposal of the communication does not interfere with the official service of the payment of disbursement for operations, purpose of the communication fiscal delivery the technical specification, purpose of the concept of the proposed communication related to the issuance of the Treasury disbursement payments of the proposal the communication comply with the applicable legal requirements. Proofs of the contact communicated related to the issue with the Treasury, the disbursement payment, the example, the communication include the information expediency, spending what a payment is being issued for the call of the action, encouraging you for the electronic payment, the method is alternative check payment, official service generally with not approve of the use of the communication services solely with the purpose of marketing federal any of the products, some of the programs, the purpose for inserts back off the envelope message of the content of the communication that cannot retard the individual payment of the recipient name that would be requiring a match for the individual Treasury check. Individual communication and serve at the back of the envelope message may be targeted to pay the population of the payment type, for example, the tax refund, benefit the vendor, miscellaneous. 317030 with the formal federal entity the request for the communication serve for the informal discussion official serve with the federal entity to decide with this formal submitted with the request for the communication for the service of the appropriate federal entity official for the will send the written request for the official serve with the chief of the distribution officer Disbursing author for the contact following information applicable for the time and the time of the duration, specification, purpose of the content for the proposal of the communication, including any special instruction for the type of the following with the check of the payments will include the proposed communication. Proposed payment, the precipitant population will achieve the communication statement that requires the communication service to comply with the federal and any official service requirements. The copy for the copy to propose the communication statement of the federal entity will agree with the reimbursement official service for the call for the confirmation of the federal entity's funding source for the funds availability, contact information, including federal entity official responsible for financial approval. The decision related with the communication. Federal entities should take care of the incur with the unnecessary pending and expense before the financing. Receiving formal official service approval, the federal entity should be submitted the formal request at least 3 months before the day of the anticipated first mailing. Proposed communication upon the receipt of the request of the official service will work for the federal entity to establish mutually with agreeable timeline review. Delivery of the request for the communications will include the time needed to review the additional information required with the official services. 3.17040 official service serves the call for the communications for the required for the Economy Act. The other applicable law officials will enter the reimbursement agreement. The federal and the expense for the associated with the printing, mailing, approve the communication of the recipient of the treasury, disbursement payments, other communication services. For additional questions, see contacts the Department of Treasury, the Bureau of Service, also for the disbursement with the management, the Chief Distributing Officer for the Department of Treasury, the Bureau of Official Service, the Federal Disbursement Services. Department of Treasury, Bureau of Official Services, Attention Special Operations, and CAS, Federal Disbursement Services, and that is the completion of Chapter 3000 Requirement Scheduling Payment Disbursement for the Bureau of Official Services.